Two drive-in carriers, 3 months. One of them almost made $100,000 in Q1 2026, and the other one not far behind. Today, I am putting every single number on this board: the revenue, the miles driven, and the rate per mile, month to month by the interstate carriers in the US. No fluff, just the real numbers. So before we get into it, this is video 1 of 3. We are doing the same breakdown for reefer and flatbed carriers in the coming days. Same format, real numbers. So if you run reefer or flatbed, or if you are curious which segment is actually paying better right now, stay tuned. Those are coming. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss them. All right, Q1 2026, January, February, and March. We are looking at two drive-in carriers. I am calling them Carrier 1 and Carrier 2, both running under their own authority, both hauling drive-in freight across the US. For each month, I am going to put three numbers on this board: their gross revenue, the total miles, and the rate per mile. So once we have all the 3 months, we are going to compare who had the better quarter and, more importantly, why. Because the gap between these two carriers tells you something real about how dispatch and load selection actually impact your bottom line. All right, let's look into the numbers. Let's go with the January for Carrier 1. So for the month of January, Carrier 1 grossed out a total of $28,120 with 11,205 miles. So what do you think the average rate per mile he got? That's around $2.51. So $2.51 is the rate per mile. That's for the Carrier 1 in the month of January. So let's look into the Carrier 2 for the month of January, how much he grossed out. So Carrier 2 in the month of January grossed out a total of $32,900 running 12,897 miles. So just keep in mind this miles is like a mix of deadhead and the loaded miles. So we keep the deadhead at the minimum so the carrier can be at the profitable at the max. So how about the RPM that he got? That's around $2.55. So when we compare Carrier 1 and Carrier 2 for the month of January, Carrier 2 got $2.55 the rate per mile, and the Carrier 1 got $2.51 as the rate per mile. So Carrier 2 has a slight advantage because he ran more miles and the carrier was actually flexible with the type of loads he was taking. So let's look into the month of February. How much did Carrier 1 and Carrier 2 got? Let's So Carrier 2 in the month of February grossed out a total of $30,350 with 11,159 miles. So the total RPM he got is $2.72. At the same time, let's look into the Carrier 2 in the month of January. Carrier 2 in the month of February grossed out a total of $29,600, slightly less than the month of January. So the total miles he got is also less than the month of January. That's 10,965 miles. So the total RPM, we can see it's $2.70. That's a RPM the Carrier 2 got in the month of February. Let's take a look in the month of March. Let's see who wins in the first quarter. So in the month of March, Carrier 1 grossed out $31,100, running 10,868 miles. So the total RPM he got is $2.86. Let's take a look into Carrier 2. So Carrier 2 in the month of March grossed out $36,900, running 12,563 miles. So the average RPM he got is $2.94. So let's take an analysis of this chart. So the month of March for Carrier 2 is the biggest that we got because the market was slightly performing better compared to the other previous months. So January was like the average of $2.51, $2.55. Then it increased on the month of February because, as I said earlier, the loads was slightly going high. So in the month of March, both the carriers were grossing out comparatively better and the rate per mile is very good. So in the month of March, Carrier 1 just had miles of 10,868, but the Carrier 2 he got 12,563 miles. So if we look into this chart, we can clearly say that Carrier 2 got more revenue, more miles, and the rate per mile also is even better for Carrier 2. Two carriers, same unit type, same quarter, but ended up with two different revenue, and the rate per mile is also different. So let's look into the total. Carrier 1 in Q1 grossed out a total of $89,570 across 33,232 miles. And Carrier 2 for quarter 1 grossed out $99,400 across 36,425 miles. And Carrier 2 wins the Q1 by $9,830. Yes, nearly $10,000 in one quarter. That's not a massive rate difference on paper, right? We are talking about 3 cents per mile average, but 3 cents per mile over 36,000 miles becomes around $10,000. And that's how margins work in trucking. So if we look into this, we can clearly see that Carrier 1 improved every single month. The revenue went up, the rate went up, and the miles actually came down. He was actually taking around 11,000 miles on an average from month 1 and 2, and he got around 10,868 miles in the month of March. And Carrier 2 had the range higher highs but dipped in month of February. The consistency of load selection made the difference by March. So that's Drive on Q1 2026. Real carriers, real numbers, nothing adjusted. Next up, we are doing the same breakdown for reefer carriers. Same format, same months. So if you're on reefer or want to compare how reefer stacks up against Drive-on, that's a video coming in next few days. And after that, flatbed. If you found this useful, share it with the carrier you know and drop your Q1 RPM in the comments. A lot of owner operators have no idea what others are actually making. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.